A bullet tears through the air toward an 8-year-old girl. Guests scatter. Security freezes. One man runs forward, not away. He's nobody. Just the maintenance worker everyone ignored 5 minutes ago. The one they laughed at for spilling champagne on his worn vest. Now he's the only thing standing between a child and death. His body hits the marble floor. Blood pools beneath him. And as the world watches the footage replay 100 million times, they'll all ask the same question. Who was Daniel Brooks, and why did he run toward the gun when everyone else ran away? If this story moves you, I invite you to stay until the very end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that like button. Now, let me tell you about the night everything changed. The Grand Meridian Hotel had never looked more beautiful than it did on the evening of October 15th. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings that stretched 40 feet high, their light fracturing into 1,000 tiny rainbows that danced across walls covered in genuine silk. The ballroom could hold 800 people comfortably, and tonight it held exactly 793 of the most powerful individuals in American technology, finance, and media. They wore gowns that cost more than most families earned in a year. They wore watches that could pay off mortgages. They wore smiles that had been practiced in mirrors and perfected over decades of climbing ladders most people didn't even know existed. This was the annual Innovators Gala, hosted by Nexus Technologies, and everyone who mattered in Silicon Valley had either received an invitation or spent the last 6 months wondering why they hadn't. Daniel Brooks was not wondering about invitations. He was wondering if the electrical panel in the service corridor was going to hold through the night, or if he'd have to make another emergency repair while 700 rich people pretended he didn't exist. "Brooks," the voice crackled through his radio. "We need you in the East Wing. One of the spotlights is flickering." Daniel pressed the button on his shoulder. "On my way." He moved through the service corridor with the efficiency of someone who had memorized every inch of this building over the past 3 years. The Grand Meridian was one of 4 properties he serviced as a contracted maintenance worker, but it was the one that paid best and demanded the most. Events like tonight required him to be invisible and indispensable simultaneously, a paradox he had learned to navigate with the same precision he once applied to very different situations. The service door opened into a small alcove near the main ballroom, and for a moment Daniel paused to take in the scene. He didn't belong here. He knew that. Everyone knew that. His khaki pants had a small tear near the left pocket that he'd been meaning to fix for 2 weeks. His work vest, navy blue with the building's logo embroidered on the back, had seen better days. His boots were steel-toed and practical, built for climbing ladders and crawling through tight spaces, not for walking across marble floors that probably cost more per square foot than his monthly rent. But the spotlight needed fixing, and no one else was going to do it. He made his way along the perimeter of the room, staying close to the walls, moving between clusters of guests who looked through him like he was made of glass. A woman in a red dress stepped backward without looking and nearly collided with him. She glanced over her shoulder, registered nothing worth her attention, and returned to her conversation without a word. Daniel kept moving. The spotlight in question was positioned near the main stage, where a podium had been set up for the evening's keynote speaker. He could see the problem immediately. A loose connection in the housing unit that was causing the bulb to flicker every few seconds. An easy fix, maybe 5 minutes of work, but he'd need to access the control panel backstage. "Excuse me." A sharp voice cut through the ambient noise of clinking glasses and polished laughter. "You, maintenance." Daniel turned to find a man in his mid-40s staring at him with the kind of expression people reserve for things they'd found on the bottom of their shoes. The man wore a suit that probably cost $5,000 and a name tag that read, "Gregory Walsh, VP of Operations, Nexus Technologies." "Yes, sir?" "What are you doing in the main ballroom? Service staff are supposed to use the back corridors." "The spotlight near the stage is malfunctioning. I need to access—" "I don't care what you need to access." Gregory Walsh stepped closer, lowering his voice to a hiss that somehow managed to be louder than his normal speaking volume. "Do you have any idea how important tonight is? Evelyn Carter is about to give the most significant keynote of her career, and I will not have some grease monkey wandering around making the company look bad." Daniel felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice even. "Sir, if I don't fix the spotlight, It's going to keep flickering during her speech. That'll look worse than me walking across the room. For a moment, Gregory Walsh's face twisted into something ugly. Then he seemed to calculate the odds and decide Daniel had a point. Fine. Fix it. But be quick about it. And for God's sake, stay out of everyone's way. Always do. Daniel moved past him without waiting for a response. He'd dealt with men like Gregory Walsh his entire life. Men who measured their own worth by how small they could make everyone else feel. In another time, in another life, Daniel might have reacted differently. But that was before Mia. That was before everything changed. He found the access panel backstage and went to work, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. Disconnect the housing, check the wiring. There it was, a loose ground wire that had probably been vibrating itself free for weeks. He secured it, tested the connection, and watched as the spotlight finally held steady. "Daddy?" Daniel's heart stopped. He turned to find his 7-year-old daughter standing in the backstage area, her small face pale with anxiety, her oversized sweater hanging past her fingertips. Beside her stood Patricia Chen, the event coordinator who had agreed, against about 14 different protocols, to let Mia stay in the building while Daniel worked tonight. "Mia!" Daniel crossed the space in 3 strides and knelt in front of her. "What's wrong? Why aren't you in the break room?" "She's fine," Patricia said quickly. "She just wanted to see you. Said she had a bad feeling." Daniel looked into his daughter's eyes, brown like her mother's had been, deep and serious, and far too old for her age. "A bad feeling about what, sweetheart?" Mia shook her head, her dark hair falling across her face. "I don't know, just bad. Like something's going to happen." Daniel pulled her into a hug, feeling her small body tremble slightly against his chest. Mia had been like this since birth, sensitive to things other people couldn't see, couldn't feel. Her mother used to call it a gift. Daniel wasn't sure what to call it, but he'd learned never to dismiss it. "Nothing's going to happen," he said softly. "I'm just fixing some lights, and then we'll go home, okay? Promise?" "Promise." He held her for a moment longer, then gently pulled back and looked at Patricia. "Can you take her back to the break room? I just need to finish up here and check on one more thing in the East Wing." "Of course." Patricia held out her hand to Mia. "Come on, sweetheart. I've got some cookies hidden in my desk that nobody knows about." Mia looked at her father one more time, her eyes searching his face for something. Reassurance, maybe, or confirmation that the bad feeling was just her imagination. Daniel smiled and squeezed her hand. "I'll come get you in an hour. We'll stop for ice cream on the way home." A small smile flickered across Mia's face. "Okay." Daniel watched them disappear through the backstage door, then turned back to his work. He still had the East Wing to check, and the evening was far from over. But the ballroom had reached capacity by the time Daniel finished his rounds. He stood in the shadows near the service entrance, watching as the crowd settled into their seats for the main event of the evening. The energy in the room had shifted from casual networking to focused anticipation. Something important was about to happen, and everyone wanted to be part of it. The lights dimmed. A spotlight, now functioning perfectly thanks to Daniel, illuminated the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed through speakers that Daniel had helped install 2 years ago. "Please welcome the CEO of Nexus Technologies and this year's recipient of the Innovators Award, Evelyn Carter." The applause was immediate and thunderous. Daniel watched as a woman in her late 30s emerged from the wings and crossed to the podium. She was striking, tall, with sharp features and auburn hair pulled back in an elegant twist. She wore a black dress that somehow managed to be both understated and impossibly expensive, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had spent her entire life being told she was exceptional. But it wasn't Evelyn Carter that made Daniel's breath catch in his throat. It was the small figure walking beside her, holding her hand. A girl, maybe 8 years old, blonde hair and 2 neat braids, a blue dress that matched her eyes. She walked with the practiced poise of a child who had attended too many adult events, but there was something fragile in her expression, something that reminded Daniel powerfully of Mia. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Evelyn began, her voice warm and controlled. "Before I begin, I want to introduce someone very special, my daughter, Lily." Another wave of applause. Lily smiled shyly and gave a small wave before Evelyn gently guided her to a seat at the edge of the stage. Daniel should have returned to his duties. He should have gone back to the break room to check on Mia. He should have done 100 things other than stand in the shadows watching a speech he had no reason to hear. But something kept him rooted in place. Something felt wrong. He couldn't explain it, couldn't point to any specific thing that had changed in the room. But his instincts, those instincts he'd spent years trying to forget, were screaming at him to pay attention, to watch, to be ready. Evelyn was 3 minutes into her speech when Daniel saw him, a man near the back of the room, mid-40s, dark hair, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit right, like he'd borrowed it or bought it in a hurry. He wasn't looking at the stage. He was looking at Lily. Daniel's entire body went cold. He'd spent years training to recognize threats before they materialized. Years learning to read body language, to identify the subtle signs that separated nervous from dangerous. He'd walked away from that life when Mia was born, had buried those skills so deep he sometimes forgot they existed. But he hadn't forgotten enough. The man's hand was moving toward his jacket. His eyes were fixed on the little girl in the blue dress. His jaw was set with the determination of someone who had already made a decision and was past the point of changing his mind. Daniel was moving before he consciously decided to move. He pushed through the crowd along the wall, his eyes never leaving the man in the ill-fitting suit. 20 feet, 15, 10. The man's hand disappeared inside his jacket and emerged holding something black and metallic that caught the light. "Gun!" someone screamed. The ballroom erupted into chaos. 700 people surged in every direction at once, their panic creating a wall of bodies between Daniel and the stage. He fought through them, shoving past men and women who were too terrified to notice or care. Security guards were shouting, trying to locate the threat, but they were too far away and too slow. The man raised the weapon. He aimed at the stage. He aimed at Lily. Daniel didn't think about what would happen next, didn't think about Mia, didn't think about the promise he'd made to her minutes ago. Didn't think about anything except the 8-year-old girl frozen in terror at the edge of the stage and the bullet that was about to end her life. He ran. Not away from the gun, toward it. The crowd parted just enough. The man's finger tightened on the trigger. Daniel launched himself forward with everything he had. The gun fired. Daniel felt the impact before he heard the sound, a hot, tearing sensation that punched through his shoulder and spun him sideways. But his momentum carried him forward, and he crashed into Lily with enough force to knock them both off the stage and onto the floor behind the podium. The second shot went wide, shattering one of the chandeliers and sending a cascade of crystal raining down on the panicked crowd. Daniel covered Lily's body with his own, pressing her flat against the cold marble, his blood already pooling beneath them. "Stay down," he whispered. "Don't move." She was crying, shaking, her small hands clutched at his vest like she was afraid he would disappear. "It's okay," he told her, though he could feel the warmth spreading across his chest and knew it wasn't okay at all. "You're safe now." Security finally reached the shooter. Daniel heard the sounds of struggle, heard someone shouting commands, heard the clatter of the weapon hitting the floor. But he didn't look up. He kept his body between Lily and everything else until hands pulled him away, gentle hands, urgent hands, hands that belonged to people who kept saying things like, "He's hit, and we need a medic," and "Oh my God, he saved her." Daniel found himself lying on his back, staring up at the fractured remains of the chandelier. The ceiling seemed very far away. The voices seemed very far away. Everything seemed to be drifting, fading, slipping beyond his reach. A face appeared above him. Auburn hair, sharp features, eyes that were wide with shock, and something else, something that looked like recognition of the impossible. Evelyn Carter. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice breaking on the words. "Who are you?" Daniel tried to answer, but his mouth wouldn't cooperate. His body was shutting down, rerouting resources, trying desperately to survive what had just happened. One word made it through. Nobody. Then the darkness took him. The next hour existed in fragments. Paramedics. Sirens. The cold metal of a stretcher beneath his back. Voices talking over him, around him, about him, words like "through and through," and significant blood loss and probable internal bleeding. Mia. He needed to find Mia. needed to tell her that Daddy was okay, that he'd kept his promise, that they'd still get ice cream on the way home. "Sir, you need to stay still." "My daughter." The words felt like gravel in his throat. "My daughter is here. In the building. She's only 7. She's alone. Please, please." Something changed in the paramedic's expression. A softening. A recognition of something deeper than the wound in Daniel's shoulder. "What's her name?" "Mia. Mia Brooks. She's in the break room with Patricia Chen. I'll make sure someone finds her. I promise. But right now you need to let us help you." The ambulance doors closed. The siren wailed. And Daniel finally let go, let himself sink into the darkness, let himself trust that someone else would take care of his daughter for the next few hours while he fought to stay alive. St. Michael's Hospital was a study in controlled chaos at 11:47 p.m. The emergency room was still processing the aftermath of the gala shooting. 3 minor injuries from the stampede, 1 security guard with a broken wrist, and Daniel Brooks, who had been rushed into surgery 40 minutes ago with a gunshot wound that had torn through his left shoulder and done damage that wouldn't be fully understood until the surgeons opened him up. In the waiting room, Evelyn Carter sat in a plastic chair and stared at the wall. She had declined to give statements to the police, declined to speak with the press that had already gathered outside, declined to answer any questions from hospital staff about her relationship to the man currently in surgery. Her daughter was safe, being watched by security and the family's private physician in a room down the hall. The shooter was in custody, his motivations still unclear, though early reports suggested some kind of grudge related to a lawsuit Nexus had won 3 years ago. None of that mattered to Evelyn right now. All that mattered was the man on the operating table, the man who had appeared out of nowhere, who had run toward danger while everyone else, including the security team she paid millions of dollars to protect her family, had frozen or fled. "Ms. Carter?" She looked up to find a hospital administrator approaching with a clipboard and an expression of careful professionalism. "We've been trying to reach Mr. Brooks' emergency contact, but the number listed in his employer's records is no longer in service. We were hoping you might be able to help us identify any family members who should be notified." "He has a daughter." The words came out hoarse. Evelyn cleared her throat and tried again. "A 7-year-old. She was at the event. Someone was supposed to. She's here." The administrator's face softened. "The event coordinator brought her about 20 minutes ago. She's been asking for her father." Evelyn stood up so fast the blood rushed from her head. "Where is she?" "The pediatric waiting area. We thought it would be more comfortable for—" But Evelyn was already walking, her heels clicking against the linoleum with a rhythm that felt somehow louder than the chaos around her. She found the pediatric wing and pushed through the doors without stopping to ask permission. The waiting area was small and cheerful, decorated with cartoon animals and colorful furniture designed to make children feel less afraid. It wasn't working. A little girl sat alone on a yellow couch, her legs tucked beneath her, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. She had dark hair and brown eyes, and an expression of terror that cut through Evelyn like a knife. "Mia?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were red from crying, and her voice was barely a whisper. "Is my daddy dead?" Evelyn crossed the room and knelt in front of her. She'd never been particularly good with children. Even her own daughter sometimes felt like a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. But something about this moment, this child, this unbearable weight of fear and hope, made the words come easily. "No, sweetheart. Your daddy is not dead. He's in surgery right now. The doctors are helping him get better. He promised me ice cream." Mia's lower lip trembled. "He said nothing bad was going to happen." And he was right. Evelyn reached out and took the girl's small hands in her own. "Nothing bad happened to you. Your daddy made sure of that. He's a very brave man. He's just a maintenance worker." The words came out small and uncertain, like Mia had heard them from someone else and wasn't sure if they were true. "That's what the mean man said. The one who yelled at him." Evelyn felt something twist in her chest. "What mean man?" "At the hotel, before the party. He told Daddy that service staff should stay out of sight. He said Daddy was going to make the company look bad." Mia's eyes welled with fresh tears. "But Daddy didn't do anything wrong. He was just fixing the lights. That's his job." Gregory Walsh, Evelyn closed her eyes and felt a wave of fury so intense it made her dizzy. She would deal with him later. Right now, there were more important things. Mia, listen to me. She waited until the girl's eyes met hers. Your daddy isn't just a maintenance worker. Do you know what he did tonight? Small shake of the head. He saved my daughter's life. A very bad man tried to hurt her, and your daddy ran toward the danger when everyone else ran away. He got hurt because he was protecting her. Do you understand what that means? Mia stared at her with those two old eyes. It means he's a hero. Yes. Evelyn's voice cracked on the word. It means he's a hero, and heroes don't die from things like this. They fight, they survive, and they come back to their daughters who are waiting for them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mia reached out and put her small hand on Evelyn's cheek. You're crying. Evelyn hadn't realized she was. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and tried to smile. I'm just relieved that Lily is safe. Thanks to your daddy. Can I see her? Lily? The question caught Evelyn off guard, but something about it felt right. These two children whose lives had intersected in the most violent possible way, finding comfort in each other while their parents navigated the aftermath. I think that's a wonderful idea. Would you like to meet her? Mia nodded. Evelyn stood and held out her hand. Come with me. The room where Lily was being watched was nicer than the pediatric waiting area, a private consultation room that the hospital had made available as a courtesy to one of its most generous donors. Lily sat on a small couch, wrapped in a blanket someone had found for her, her blue dress stained with something dark that Evelyn refused to identify. Blood. Daniel Brooks' blood. Mommy? Lily jumped up and ran to her mother, wrapping her arms around Evelyn's waist. Is the man okay? The one who saved me? Is he going to be okay? He's in surgery, baby. The doctors are doing everything they can. Lily pulled back and looked at the small figure standing behind her mother. Who's that? Evelyn stepped aside so the girls could see each other properly. This is Mia. She's the daughter of the man who saved you. I thought you might want to meet her. The two girls stared at each other for a long moment. Lily, with her blonde braids and tear-streaked face. Mia, with her dark hair and haunted eyes. They were so different and yet, in this moment, connected by something neither of them fully understood. It was Lily who moved first. She crossed the room, took Mia's hand, and led her to the couch. Do you want to sit with me? My mom says waiting is easier when you're not alone. Mia looked at her father's blood on Lily's dress, looked at the girl whose life had been saved at the cost of her father's safety, looked at the hand holding hers, small and warm and trembling slightly. Okay, she whispered. They sat together on the couch, two children in a hospital room, waiting for news about a man who had changed both of their lives in the span of a single heartbeat. Evelyn watched them for a moment, then stepped into the hallway and pulled out her phone. She had calls to make, arrangements to handle, a company to run and a crisis to manage, and 100 other responsibilities that demanded her attention. But first she had something else to do. Get me everything, she said when her assistant answered. Every file, every record, every piece of information that exists about Daniel Brooks. I want to know who he is, where he came from, and how he ended up working maintenance at the Grand Meridian Hotel. Ms. Carter, it's almost midnight. I don't care what time it is. A man is in surgery right now because he saved my daughter's life. The least I can do is find out his name. She hung up and looked through the window at the two girls on the couch. Lily had found a children's book somewhere and was showing the pictures to Mia, who was nodding quietly, her eyes still red but her face slightly calmer than before. Something had shifted tonight. Evelyn could feel it in her bones. A man she'd never met, a man whose existence she hadn't even been aware of until he threw himself between her daughter and death, had forced her to see something she'd been avoiding for years. The world was full of invisible people. People who kept the lights on and fixed the broken things and showed up every day to do jobs that no one thanked them for. People who had daughters of their own and dreams of their own and lives that mattered just as much as the lives of CEOs and celebrities and all the powerful people who filled ballrooms and accepted awards. Daniel Brooks was one of those people. And tonight, he had proven that invisible didn't mean unimportant. The surgery lasted 4 hours. At 3:27 in the morning, A doctor in blue scrubs emerged from the operating room and walked toward the group that had gathered in the waiting area. Evelyn was there, along with Patricia Chen, who had refused to leave until she knew Daniel was okay. Gregory Walsh was notably absent. Evelyn had sent him home with a look that promised consequences. The two girls had fallen asleep on the couch, Lily's head resting on Mia's shoulder, their hands still intertwined. "Mr. Brooks is out of surgery," the doctor said. The bullet passed through his shoulder and nicked an artery, which caused the significant blood loss. We were able to repair the damage and remove some bone fragments that had lodged near the joint. He'll need extensive physical therapy, and he's going to be in considerable pain for the next few weeks, but barring complications, he should make a full recovery. Evelyn closed her eyes and felt something release in her chest that she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Can we see him?" "He's in the ICU for observation, but yes, brief visits are allowed, one at a time." "His daughter first." Evelyn looked at the sleeping child. "She needs to see that he's alive." The doctor nodded and moved to wake Mia gently. "Sweetheart, your daddy is out of surgery. Would you like to see him?" Mia's eyes flew open, and for a moment she looked confused, like she'd forgotten where she was or why. Then everything came rushing back, and she scrambled off the couch with an urgency that broke Evelyn's heart. "Where is he? Is he okay? Can I see him?" "Right this way." Evelyn watched them disappear down the hallway, the small girl in the oversized sweater practically running to keep up with the doctor's long strides. She thought about her own daughter, still asleep on the couch, and felt a wave of gratitude so overwhelming it made her knees weak. That could have been Lily in the operating room. That could have been Lily with a bullet in her shoulder, or worse. That could have been Evelyn standing in this waiting room, wondering if her child would ever wake up again. But it wasn't. Because a man she'd never met had made a choice, had seen danger and run toward it instead of away, had put his body between a bullet and a little girl who wasn't even his own. Why? Evelyn didn't know, but she intended to find out. The ICU room was small and sterile, filled with machines that beeped and hummed in rhythms Mia didn't understand. Her father lay in the center of it all, his shoulder wrapped in bandages, tubes running from his arm to bags of clear liquid that hung beside the bed. He looked smaller than she remembered, smaller and older and infinitely fragile. "Daddy?" His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening as they found her face. A smile spread across his features, weak but genuine, the smile he reserved only for her. "Hey, sweetheart." Mia climbed onto the chair beside his bed and leaned forward until her forehead was almost touching his. "You broke your promise. You said nothing bad was going to happen." "I said nothing bad was going to happen to you." He reached up with his good hand and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "And I was right. You're okay. That's all that matters." "You got shot." Her voice cracked on the word. "Daddy, you got shot. There was so much blood. I thought you were going to die." "I'm not going to die, Mia. I'm too stubborn to die. That's not funny." "It wasn't meant to be funny. It was meant to be true." He shifted slightly, wincing at the pain, and patted the edge of the bed. "Come here." She crawled up beside him, careful to avoid the wires and tubes, and tucked herself against his good side. He wrapped his arm around her and held her close, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "The lady said you're a hero, the one with the red hair. She said you saved her daughter's life." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "I did what anyone would do." "But nobody else did. The lady said everyone ran away except you." Mia lifted her head to look at him. "Why didn't you run away?" It was a question Daniel had been asking himself since the moment he'd opened his eyes in this hospital bed. Why had he run toward the gun instead of away from it? Why had he risked everything, his life, his daughter's future, the quiet existence he'd built from the ashes of his past, for a child he didn't know? The answer, when it came, was simpler than he'd expected. "Because I couldn't let her get hurt. When I saw that man with the gun, when I saw him pointing it at that little girl, I thought about you. I thought about how scared you'd be if someone was pointing a gun at you. And I knew that her mother was somewhere in that room, feeling the same fear I would feel if it was you up on that stage. So you saved her because you're a daddy." "I saved her because she's someone's daughter, someone's whole world, And I couldn't stand there and let someone's whole world get destroyed when there was something I could do to stop it. Mia was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she nodded, as if his answer had satisfied some internal question she'd been working through. Daddy? Yeah? Can we still get ice cream? Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the weight of what had happened and what was still to come, Daniel laughed. It hurt, but he didn't care. Yeah, sweetheart, we can still get ice cream, but maybe tomorrow, okay? Daddy needs to rest. Okay. She settled back against his side and closed her eyes. I'm glad you're not dead. Me too, baby. Me too. In the hallway outside the ICU, Evelyn Carter stood watching through the window as the maintenance worker and his daughter held each other. She'd seen a lot of things in her 42 years of life, had built an empire from nothing, had navigated boardrooms full of men who wanted to see her fail, had buried a husband who'd loved her more than she'd deserved. But she had never seen anything quite like this. The man in that bed had nothing. No money, no power, no status or influence or any of the things the world said mattered. He fixed lights and unclogged drains and probably worried every month about whether he could afford rent. And yet, he had done something that all her wealth and influence couldn't do. He had saved her daughter. Evelyn's phone buzzed. Her assistant had sent the preliminary information she'd requested: Daniel Brooks' employment records, his background check, his personnel file from the building management company. She opened the file and began to read. And somewhere in those dry, clinical documents, she found the first hint of the truth. Daniel Marcus Brooks, age 39, single father, former United States Marine, multiple tours in Afghanistan, honorable discharge following an incident that was classified above her clearance level. He wasn't just a maintenance worker. He was a warrior who had laid down his weapons to become a father. And tonight, for one brief, terrible, beautiful moment, the warrior had resurfaced to save a little girl who wasn't his own. Evelyn closed the file and looked back through the window. Daniel's eyes had closed, his daughter still curled against his side, both of them finally at peace. She didn't know what came next. Didn't know how to begin repaying a debt that couldn't be measured in dollars or stock options or any of the currencies she understood, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Daniel Brooks would never be invisible again. The morning light filtered through the hospital blinds in thin golden strips, painting patterns across Daniel's face as he drifted between sleep and waking. His shoulder throbbed with a deep, persistent ache that the morphine could only dull, not eliminate. But the pain was distant, manageable, nothing compared to what he'd experienced in places he no longer allowed himself to remember. What wasn't manageable was the emptiness beside him where Mia had been. His eyes snapped open, and he pushed himself up too quickly, sending a jolt of fire through his injured shoulder that made him gasp. Easy, Mr. Brooks. A nurse appeared at his bedside, her hands gentle but firm as she eased him back against the pillows. Your daughter is fine. She's in the cafeteria with Ms. Carter's assistant. They're getting breakfast. Daniel's heart was still racing, but he forced himself to breathe. How long was I out? About 4 hours. The doctors want to keep you for observation for at least another day, maybe 2. You lost a lot of blood. I need to see my daughter. And you will. But first, you need to eat something and let me check your vitals. The nurse smiled, the kind of smile that suggested she'd dealt with stubborn patients before and knew exactly how to handle them. The faster you cooperate, the faster you see Mia. Deal? Daniel wanted to argue, but he recognized a losing battle when he saw one. Deal. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of blood pressure cuffs and temperature checks and questions about his pain level on a scale of 1 to 10. Daniel answered everything on autopilot, his mind elsewhere, running through the events of the previous night like a film on repeat. The man with the gun, the little girl in the blue dress, the split-second decision that had changed everything. He didn't regret it. That was the strange thing. Despite the hole in his shoulder and the fear he'd seen in Mia's eyes, and all the complications that were undoubtedly headed his way, he didn't regret a single moment of what he'd done. Because Lily Carter was alive. Because someone's daughter was going home to her mother instead of to a morgue. That was worth a bullet. That was worth 1,000 bullets. Daddy! Mia burst through the door with the force of a small hurricane, Her face split into a grin that made Daniel's chest ache in ways that had nothing to do with his injury. She launched herself at the bed, and he caught her with his good arm, pulling her close and breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "Careful, sweetheart. Daddy's still a little sore." "I know. The nurse told me. She said I have to be gentle." Mia pulled back and studied his face with an intensity that made him feel like he was being evaluated by someone far older than 7. "You look terrible." "Thanks. I feel terrible. But you're alive, so that's good." "That's very good." Mia climbed onto the bed beside him, careful to avoid his injured side, and snuggled against him. "The lady bought me pancakes, the ones with the chocolate chips. She said I could have whatever I wanted." "What lady?" "The one from last night, with the red hair, Lily's mom." Daniel felt something shift in his chest. "Evelyn Carter bought you breakfast?" Uh-huh. "And she sat with me the whole time. She asked me lots of questions about you, like what your favorite food is and what movies you like, and whether you have any family besides me." Mia looked up at him with those 2 old eyes. "I told her it's just us. Just you and me. Was that okay?" "That was fine, sweetheart." Daniel stroked her hair, trying to process what she was telling him. "What else did she ask?" "She wanted to know about your job, about how long you've been fixing things at the hotel. I told her 3 years since we moved here after—" Mia trailed off, her small face clouding. "After Mommy went away." Daniel's throat tightened. They didn't talk about Sarah often, not because he wanted to forget her, but because the memories were still too sharp, too painful to examine directly. His wife had died of cancer 4 years ago, when Mia was only 3. The disease had taken her slowly, piece by piece, and Daniel had watched helplessly as the woman he loved faded away before his eyes. After the funeral, he'd made a decision. He would give Mia the life her mother had wanted for her, a life of stability and safety and normalcy. No more deployments, no more danger, no more waking up in foreign countries wondering if today was the day he wouldn't come home. He'd walked away from everything he'd ever known and reinvented himself as someone ordinary, someone invisible, until last night. "Mr. Brooks?" A woman appeared in the doorway, mid-20s, dressed in the kind of professional attire that suggested she spent more time in boardrooms than hospitals. She held a tablet in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. "I'm Jessica Huang, Ms. Carter's executive assistant. She asked me to check on you and see if there's anything you need." "I need to go home." The words came out sharper than Daniel intended. "I appreciate everything Ms. Carter has done, but Mia has school tomorrow and I have work, and we need to get back to our regular lives." Jessica's expression remained professionally neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. "Mr. Brooks, I don't think you understand. Ms. Carter has arranged for all your medical expenses to be covered. She's also contacted your employer to let them know you'll be taking a leave of absence until you've fully recovered. Paid, of course." "I didn't ask for any of that." "No, but you saved her daughter's life. This is the least she can do." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. He didn't want charity, didn't want to be someone's project or pet cause or feel-good story. He'd built his life on self-reliance, on the principle that he needed nothing from anyone except the opportunity to work hard and provide for his daughter. "Tell Ms. Carter I appreciate the gesture, but it's not necessary. I'll take care of my own bills." Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but another voice cut through the room. "That's very noble, Mr. Brooks, but also very stupid." Evelyn Carter stood in the doorway, looking significantly more put together than she had the night before. She'd changed out of the blood-stained black dress and into a charcoal blazer and dark slacks, her auburn hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. But there were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, and something in her expression suggested she hadn't slept at all. "Ms. Carter." Daniel tried to sit up straighter and immediately regretted it. "I was just telling your assistant." "I heard what you were telling my assistant, and I'm telling you that you're wrong." Evelyn crossed the room and took the chair beside his bed, her movements deliberate and controlled. "Do you have any idea what a surgery like yours costs? What the follow-up care will cost? The physical therapy? The medications? The time off work?" "I'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. Evelyn's voice was flat, but her eyes were blazing. You're a single father working maintenance jobs, and you'll just figure out how to pay $50,000 in medical bills. 50,000? Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. He'd known hospital bills were expensive, but he hadn't allowed himself to think about specific numbers. At minimum, probably closer to 75 by the time everything is done. Evelyn leaned forward, her gaze pinning him in place. You took a bullet for my daughter. You ran toward a gun while 700 people, including the security team I pay a small fortune to, ran away, and you're sitting here telling me you don't want my help? I don't want to be someone's charity case. Then don't think of it as charity. Think of it as what's right. Evelyn's voice softened slightly, and for a moment, Daniel caught a glimpse of something beneath the corporate armor. Something vulnerable. You saved Lily's life, Mr. Brooks. Do you have any idea what that means to me? Do you have any idea what I would give, what I would sacrifice to protect my child? Daniel looked at Mia, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes, and felt something shift in his chest. Yeah, I do. Then let me help you. Not because you need it, but because I need to give it. Because if I don't do something, if I just let you walk out of here and struggle alone while you're recovering from a wound you got protecting my family, I won't be able to live with myself. The room fell silent. Daniel could hear the beeping of the monitors, the distant sounds of the hospital beyond the door, the soft rhythm of Mia's breathing beside him. He thought about the bills that were already piling up, the rent that was due next week, the fact that his insurance through the maintenance company was barely worth the paper it was printed on. He thought about Mia, who deserved better than a father who was too proud to accept help when it was offered. And he thought about Sarah, who had always told him that strength wasn't about doing everything alone. It was about knowing when to let others carry part of the weight. Okay, he said finally, but I want to pay you back. Eventually. When I can. We'll discuss that later. Evelyn stood, and some of the tension seemed to drain from her shoulders. For now, just focus on getting better. I've arranged for a private room, and I've asked the hospital to expedite your discharge as soon as the doctors clear it. You didn't have to do that. I know, but I wanted to. She paused at the door and looked back at him. Mr. Brooks, I've spent 20 years building a company that I thought would change the world. I've given speeches and accepted awards and had my picture on magazine covers. But last night, I watched a man I'd never met do something I couldn't do. Something nobody in that room could do except you. Her voice caught slightly, and she cleared her throat. I don't know who you are or where you came from, but I know what you did, and I know it matters. She was gone before Daniel could respond, leaving him alone with Mia and the weight of her words. Daddy? Mia tugged at his sleeve. Is that lady going to be our friend now? Daniel thought about Evelyn Carter, about her sharp edges and obvious wealth and the vulnerability she tried so hard to hide. He thought about the way she'd looked at him, not with pity but with respect, like he was something more than a maintenance worker who'd gotten lucky. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. I hope so. Mia settled back against his side. Lily's nice. She shared her crayons with me. Daniel smiled despite everything, despite the pain and the uncertainty and the strange new world he'd somehow stumbled into. That was kind of her. She said her mom works all the time and never plays with her. She said she's always with nannies and tutors and people who get paid to take care of her. Mia looked up at him with an expression that was half innocent, half wise. That's sad, isn't it? To have someone who gets paid to love you instead of someone who just does? The words hit Daniel harder than he expected. He thought about all the times he'd come home exhausted from work, barely able to keep his eyes open. And Mia had been waiting for him with drawings she'd made or stories she wanted to tell. He thought about the weekends they spent at the park, the evenings they spent cooking dinner together, the bedtime rituals that had evolved over years into something sacred and unbreakable. He didn't have money. He didn't have power or influence or any of the things Evelyn Carter took for granted. But he had time. He had presence. He had love that didn't come with a salary or a job description. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was more than enough. Yes, sweetheart, he said softly. That is sad. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Doctors came and went, checking Daniel's vitals and asking questions about his pain levels. Physical therapists stopped by to discuss his recovery plan. Social workers appeared with forms to fill out and resources to consider. Through it all, Mia stayed by his side, occasionally wandering to the window to watch the city below, or flipping through the channels on the television mounted on the wall. She was quieter than usual, and Daniel knew she was still processing everything that had happened. 7-year-olds weren't supposed to see their fathers get shot. They weren't supposed to spend nights in hospital waiting rooms, wondering if they were about to become orphans. But Mia had always been different, had always been older than her years, more aware of the darkness in the world than any child should be. Maybe it was because of what had happened to her mother. Maybe it was something else, something innate, something she'd been born with. Either way, Daniel knew he needed to talk to her, really talk to her, not just the surface conversations they'd been having since she'd arrived at the hospital. "Mia, come here." She looked up from the television and crossed to the bed, climbing up beside him without hesitation. "What is it?" "I need to tell you something about last night, about why I did what I did." "You already told me. You said you couldn't let the little girl get hurt." "That's true, but there's more to it than that." Daniel took a breath, feeling the weight of words he'd been carrying for years. "A long time ago, before you were born, I used to be a soldier. I went to faraway places and did things that were sometimes scary and sometimes dangerous. And I got very good at protecting people from bad things." Mia's eyes widened. "You were a soldier? Like in the movies?" "Sort of, but not like the movies. In real life, being a soldier is hard. You see things that stay with you forever. You do things that you can't forget, even when you want to." Daniel's voice grew quiet. "And sometimes you come home and you realize that you're not the same person you were before. Is that why you fix lights now? Because you didn't want to be a soldier anymore?" "Partly, but mostly it's because of you." He cupped her face in his hand. "When your mom and I found out we were going to have you, I made a decision. I decided that I was going to be there for every moment of your life. Every first step, every first word, every bad dream and skinned knee and school play. I didn't want to be a soldier anymore. I wanted to be your dad." Mia was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Then she asked the question he'd been dreading. "Is that why you ran toward the gun? Because you used to be a soldier?" Daniel hesitated. It would be easy to say yes, to let her believe that his training had kicked in automatically, and he'd done what any soldier would do. But Mia deserved the truth, even if it was complicated. "I ran toward the gun because I saw a little girl who was about to get hurt, and I couldn't let that happen. The soldier part of me probably helped me know what to do. But the dad part of me, the part that loves you more than anything in the world, that's what made me move. Because I thought about how scared that girl's mom must have been. And I knew that if it was you up on that stage, I would want someone to save you too." Mia nodded slowly, as if this answer satisfied something deep inside her. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. "I'm glad the soldier part of you came back," she whispered, "even though you got hurt, because now Lily's mom still has her little girl, and I still have my daddy." Daniel felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, but he blinked them back. "I'm glad too, sweetheart. I'm glad too." They stayed like that for a while, father and daughter, connected by something stronger than words. The hospital noise faded into the background, and for a moment nothing existed except the two of them, their breathing synchronized, their hearts beating in rhythm. Eventually, Mia pulled back and looked at him with an expression that was somehow both childlike and ancient. "Daddy? Yeah? Can I ask you something else?" "Anything." "What happened to the bad man? The one who tried to hurt Lily?" Daniel had been wondering the same thing. The police had interviewed him briefly the night before, but they'd been more focused on what he'd seen than on what had happened after. He knew the shooter had been apprehended, but beyond that, the details were fuzzy. "I don't know, sweetheart. The police took him away. He'll probably go to jail for a very long time." "Good." Mia's voice was fierce in a way that surprised him. "He should go to jail forever. He hurt you. He scared Lily. He ruined everything." "He did hurt me, but he didn't ruin everything." Daniel smoothed her hair back from her face. "Look at us. We're still here. We're still together. That's not ruined. That's the opposite of ruined." But you have a hole in your shoulder. It'll heal. Bodies are good at healing, and we have lots of hospital bills. Miss Carter is helping with those. And you can't work for a long time. Also covered, Mia frowned, clearly running out of counter-arguments. Fine, but I still think you should go to jail forever. I think you might be right about that. A knock at the door interrupted them. Daniel looked up to find a man in his 50s standing in the doorway, dressed in a rumpled gray suit that had seen better days. He had the tired eyes and permanent frown of someone who had spent decades dealing with the worst of humanity. Mr. Brooks, I'm Detective Marcus Webb. I was hoping to ask you some questions about what happened last night. Daniel nodded and gently shifted Mia off the bed. Sweetheart, can you go wait in the hallway for a minute? Maybe find a vending machine? Mia looked like she wanted to argue, but something in his expression must have convinced her otherwise. She took the money he offered and slipped out of the room, closing the door behind her. Detective Webb took the chair beside the bed and pulled out a small notebook. First of all, I want to say thank you. What you did last night was extraordinarily brave. A lot of people are alive because of you. Just one person, Daniel corrected. The little girl. And the people who would have been caught in the crossfire if you hadn't stopped him. The shooter had multiple weapons on him. If he'd gotten off more than 2 shots. Webb shook his head. It could have been a massacre. Daniel absorbed this information in silence. He'd been so focused on Lily, so tunnel-visioned on the immediate threat, that he hadn't considered the larger picture. What do you know about him, he asked. The shooter? Webb flipped through his notebook. His name is Marcus Chen, 43 years old, former employee of a company that Nexus Technologies acquired and dissolved about 4 years ago. He lost his job, his pension, his health insurance. His wife left him. He lost custody of his kids. The detective looked up. Classic profile. Someone who felt like the system had destroyed him and wanted to destroy something back. But why target the little girl? What did she have to do with any of that? That's the million-dollar question. Webb leaned back in his chair. Best we can figure, he wanted to hurt Evelyn Carter in the worst possible way. Take away the thing she loved most. Make her feel the same pain he felt when his family was taken from him. Daniel thought about Mia, about how he would feel if someone targeted her because of something he had done. The rage that rose in his chest was so intense it almost frightened him. Will he go to prison? For a very long time. Attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, terrorism charges. He's looking at life without parole. Good. Webb studied him for a moment, his experienced eyes taking in details that most people would miss. You served, didn't you? Military? Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Marines, 3 tours in Afghanistan. Thought so, the way you moved last night, the way you assessed the threat, and responded. That's not something civilians know how to do. Webb closed his notebook. I've seen the security footage. You crossed 40 feet of crowded ballroom in under 5 seconds, identified the threat, calculated the angle of attack, and positioned yourself to intercept the bullet. Most people would have frozen. Hell, most trained security professionals would have frozen. I didn't think about it. I just moved. That's what makes it impressive. Webb stood and extended his hand. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. On behalf of everyone who was in that room last night. Daniel shook his hand, feeling the weight of the detective's gratitude settle over him like a blanket. Just doing what anyone would do. That's where you're wrong. Webb moved toward the door. Anyone would have run. You didn't. That makes you something special. He was gone before Daniel could argue. The afternoon brought more visitors. Patricia Chen stopped by with flowers and tears and profuse apologies for letting Mia stay in the building that night. Daniel assured her that none of it was her fault, that she had done everything right, that Mia had been safe and cared for, and that was all that mattered. A group of maintenance workers from the Grand Meridian came by next. Men and women Daniel had worked alongside for years without ever really getting to know. They brought a card signed by everyone in the department and a small envelope of cash they'd collected. It's not much, said Roberto, the senior technician, his accent thick with emotion. But we wanted you to know that we see you. We've always seen you. Daniel was so moved he couldn't speak. He simply nodded and accepted the envelope, knowing that these people had given money they couldn't afford to spare, money that would have gone to their own families and their own bills and their own struggles. That was the thing about invisible people. They saw each other, even when no one else did. As the day wore on and the visitors thinned out, Daniel found himself alone with his thoughts. Mia had fallen asleep in the chair beside him, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the past 24 hours. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beeping of the monitors and the distant sounds of life continuing beyond the walls. He thought about what the detective had said, about Marcus Chen, the man who had tried to kill Lily Carter, about a life destroyed by corporate decisions, a family shattered by forces beyond anyone's control. Daniel understood that kind of pain. He had felt it himself after Sarah died, that bottomless grief that made you want to tear the world apart just to make it stop. He had considered violence, had fantasized about finding someone to blame, someone to hurt, someone to make pay for the injustice of watching the woman he loved die by inches. But he hadn't done it. He had looked at Mia, at her innocent face and her trusting eyes, and he had made a different choice. He had chosen to build instead of destroy, to protect instead of attack, to love instead of hate. Marcus Chen had made the opposite choice, and now an 8-year-old girl would grow up with nightmares. A father would spend months recovering from a wound that should never have happened, and everyone who had been in that ballroom would carry the trauma for the rest of their lives. Was there something Daniel could have done? Some intervention he could have made years ago when Marcus Chen was first spiraling into darkness? Could a kind word or a helping hand have changed the trajectory that ended with a gun pointed at a child? He didn't know. Couldn't know. The past was immutable, carved in stone, beyond the reach of regret or redemption. But the future was different. The future was still being written, and Daniel had a chance to influence how the story ended. He just had to figure out how. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He looked up to find Evelyn Carter standing in the doorway again, but this time she wasn't alone. Lily was with her, clutching her mother's hand, wearing a purple sweater that seemed too big for her small frame. "I hope we're not disturbing you," Evelyn said quietly, noticing Mia asleep in the chair. "Lily wanted to see you." Daniel gestured for them to come in. "It's fine, she's a heavy sleeper." Evelyn guided Lily to the bedside, and the little girl stared at Daniel with eyes that were far too serious for someone her age. She looked different than she had at the gala, less polished, more real. The fancy dress had been replaced by casual clothes, and her blonde hair hung loose around her shoulders instead of being pulled back in those neat braids. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi, Lily. I wanted to thank you for saving me." Her voice was steady, rehearsed, like she'd been practicing the words all day. "Mommy said I should tell you that you're very brave and that I'm grateful." "That was very nice of your mommy to suggest, but you don't need to thank me." Lily's brow furrowed. "Why not?" "Because you didn't do anything wrong. You were just standing on a stage, being a kid. What happened wasn't your fault, and you don't owe me anything for protecting you from something that should never have happened in the first place." Lily seemed to consider this for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I made this for you. Mommy said you have a daughter too, so I thought you might like it." Daniel took the paper and unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing, done in crayon, showing two figures standing side by side. One was tall with brown hair, the other small with blonde braids. Above them, Lily had written in careful, uneven letters, "Thank you for being brave." Something tightened in Daniel's chest. He looked at the little girl who had almost died, who was standing in front of him with a crayon drawing and a carefully rehearsed thank you. And he saw not a CEO's daughter, but simply a child who was scared and confused and trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. "This is beautiful, Lily. I'm going to keep it forever." A small smile flickered across her face. "Really? Really. And when I'm feeling sad or scared, I'm going to look at it and remember that I helped someone. That's the best gift anyone could give me." Lily's smile widened, and for a moment she looked like a normal 8-year-old instead of a trauma survivor. "Can I meet your daughter? Mommy said she's really nice." Daniel glanced at Mia, still sleeping peacefully in the chair. "She's resting right now, but I'm sure she'd love to play with you when we're all feeling better. Maybe we could arrange something?" He looked at Evelyn as he said this, unsure if he was overstepping, but Evelyn nodded, her expression soft. "I think that would be wonderful. Lily could use a friend her own age, someone who isn't..." She trailed off, but Daniel understood what she meant. Someone who isn't paid to be there. Someone who isn't part of the corporate machinery. Someone real. Mia would like that too, he said. She doesn't have many friends. We move around a lot. Then it's settled. Evelyn put her hand on Lily's shoulder. But for now, we should let Mr. Brooks rest. He needs to get better so he can go home to his daughter. Lily nodded and took one last look at Daniel. I'm glad you didn't die, she said simply. Me too, Lily. Me too. Evelyn guided her daughter toward the door, but paused before leaving. Mr. Brooks, there's something I need to tell you, something you should know before you see the news. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. What is it? The footage from last night. The security cameras captured everything. Someone leaked it to the press, and it's been playing on every news channel since this morning. Evelyn's voice was carefully controlled, but he could hear the tension underneath. You're famous, Daniel. The whole country knows your name. The words hit him like a physical blow. Famous. His name. On every news channel, everything he had built over the past 7 years, the quiet anonymity he had cultivated so carefully, the invisible life he had created for himself and his daughter, all of it, gone in a single night. I tried to contain it, Evelyn continued, but it was too late. The story was already everywhere by the time I woke up this morning. They're calling you a hero, the man who ran toward danger, the maintenance worker who saved a child. Daniel closed his eyes and felt the world tilt beneath him. He had spent years hiding from his past, years building a new identity, a new life, a new version of himself that had nothing to do with the man he used to be. And now, because of one split-second decision, that man was about to be exposed to the world. I'm sorry, Evelyn said softly. I know this isn't what you wanted. Daniel opened his eyes and looked at her. At the woman who had everything and still managed to look haunted. At the mother who would do anything to protect her child. It's not your fault, he said. You didn't leak the footage. No, but I'm the reason it exists. If I hadn't insisted on having cameras everywhere, if I hadn't been so paranoid about security, then no one would have proof of what happened. And Marcus Chen's lawyers would probably be arguing that I attacked him first. Daniel shook his head. The footage protects me as much as it exposes me. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. You're taking this remarkably well. I don't have a choice. What's done is done. He looked down at Lily's drawing, still clutched in his hand. Besides, maybe it's time. Maybe I've been hiding long enough. Hiding from what? Daniel didn't answer. Couldn't answer, because the truth was too complicated, too painful, too deeply buried to explain in a hospital room with his daughter sleeping 3 feet away. Go home, he said instead. Take care of Lily. Let her be a kid for a while. Evelyn nodded slowly, accepting his deflection. We'll talk soon. There are things we need to discuss. Your recovery, your job, your future. I figured. She left, taking Lily with her, and Daniel was alone again with his sleeping daughter and his racing thoughts. Famous. The word echoed in his mind like a death knell. He reached for the television remote and turned it on, flipping through channels until he found what he was looking for. His own face stared back at him from the screen, frozen in a moment of action, his body suspended in midair as he threw himself toward the stage. The footage was grainy but clear enough to show the determination in his expression, the desperation in his movements, the pure, unthinking courage of a man who had decided that a child's life was worth more than his own safety. The news anchor was speaking, but Daniel couldn't focus on the words. He was too busy watching himself, seeing the moment from the outside for the first time, understanding how it must have looked to everyone else in that room. No wonder they were calling him a hero. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had made a choice and was now living with the consequences. But maybe that was what heroism really was. Not the feeling of being brave, but the choice to act despite the fear. Mia stirred in the chair beside him, her eyes fluttering open. She saw the television and froze. Daddy, that's you. Yeah, sweetheart, that's me. You're on TV. Her voice was filled with wonder. You're famous. Daniel turned off the television and set the remote aside. Apparently so. Does that mean we're going to be rich now, like Lily and her mom? The innocence of the question made Daniel laugh despite everything. I don't think it works that way, sweetheart. Being famous and being rich are two different things. Oh, Mia considered this. Well, can we at least get better ice cream? The kind with the cookie pieces in it? Daniel pulled her close and pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Yeah, we can definitely get better ice cream. Outside the hospital window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere out there, the world was talking about Daniel Brooks, the maintenance worker who had saved a little girl. They were dissecting his actions, analyzing his motives, turning him into a symbol of something larger than himself. But in here, in this small hospital room, he was just a dad with a hole in his shoulder and a pile of complications waiting for him, and a daughter who wanted ice cream with cookie pieces. That was enough. That had always been enough. The rest of it, the fame, the attention, the inevitable exposure of his past, he would deal with that when it came. For now, he had this moment, this sunset, this child. That was all that mattered. The video had been viewed 47 million times by the time Daniel woke on his third morning in the hospital. He knew this because Mia told him, her small face illuminated by the glow of a tablet that Evelyn's assistant had brought the day before. She sat cross-legged on the end of his bed, scrolling through comments with an intensity that made Daniel's chest tight with anxiety. "This one says you're a real-life superhero," Mia announced, her voice bright with pride. "And this one says you should get a medal. And this one—" She paused, her brow furrowing. "This one uses words I'm not supposed to read." Daniel reached over and gently took the tablet from her hands. "I think that's enough internet for today." "But Daddy, everyone's talking about you. There's even a hashtag, #ShieldMan. Isn't that cool?" "It's something." Daniel set the tablet on the bedside table and looked out the window at the city beyond. Los Angeles stretched toward the horizon in a sprawl of concrete and glass, millions of people going about their lives, most of them now aware of his name and his face and the single moment that had defined him in the eyes of the world. Shield Man. The name felt strange, like a costume that didn't quite fit. He had spent 7 years being nobody. 7 years cultivating invisibility, building a life so ordinary that no one would ever think to look twice at him. He had done this deliberately, systematically, because he knew what happened when people started paying attention. He knew what questions they would ask, what secrets they would uncover, what truths would come spilling out into the light. And now, because of 30 seconds in a ballroom, all of that careful work was unraveling. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He looked up expecting a nurse or another doctor, but the man who entered was neither. He was tall, mid-60s, with silver hair cropped short in a military cut, and eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. He wore civilian clothes, a simple polo shirt and khakis, but he carried himself with the rigid posture of someone who had spent decades in uniform. Daniel's blood went cold. "Sergeant Brooks." The man's voice was quiet, controlled. "It's been a long time." Mia looked between them with curiosity. "Daddy, who's that?" Daniel forced himself to breathe, to stay calm, to not let his daughter see the fear that was crawling up his spine like ice. "Mia, sweetheart, can you go find Jessica? I think she's in the waiting room. Tell her I need to speak with this gentleman privately." "But, please, Mia." Something in his tone must have communicated the seriousness of the situation, because Mia slid off the bed without further argument and slipped out of the room. The door clicked shut behind her, and suddenly the space felt very small. "Colonel Morrison." Daniel's voice came out steadier than he felt. "I wasn't expecting to see you." "No, I don't suppose you were." Morrison crossed to the chair beside the bed and sat down without being invited. "You've been a hard man to find, Daniel. After you left the service, you disappeared completely. No forwarding address, no social media, no contact with anyone from your unit. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were trying to hide." "I wasn't hiding, I was living." "Is that what you call it?" Morrison's eyes swept over the hospital room, taking in the modest surroundings, the worn duffel bag in the corner, the children's drawings taped to the wall. "You were one of the finest soldiers I ever commanded. You could have had a career, a pension, benefits. Instead, you're fixing lights in hotels and nearly getting killed by some lunatic with a grudge. I made my choice." "Yes, you did." Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying Daniel with an expression that was impossible to read. "But choices have consequences. And right now, the consequences of your choice to play hero are creating some significant complications. Daniel felt his jaw tighten. What kind of complications? The kind that involve classified operations, sealed records, and things the American public was never supposed to know about. Morrison pulled a phone from his pocket and held it up so Daniel could see the screen. 47 million views. That's 47 million people who now know your face. How long do you think it'll be before someone starts digging, before some journalist decides to find out who Daniel Brooks really is and what he did before he started fixing lights? The fear Daniel had been suppressing surged to the surface. They won't find anything. My records are sealed. Sealed doesn't mean destroyed. And in the age of WikiLeaks and whistleblowers, sealed doesn't mean safe. Morrison put the phone away. There are people in Washington who are very concerned about this situation, Daniel. People who remember what you did in Kandahar, what you saw, what you know. I've kept my mouth shut for 7 years. And we're grateful for that. But gratitude doesn't extend to trust. Not when the stakes are this high. Morrison's voice hardened. You saved a little girl's life, and that's admirable. But in doing so, you've put yourself back on the radar, and some of the people tracking that radar don't have your best interests at heart. Daniel stared at him, processing the implications. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you, there's a difference. Morrison stood and moved to the window, his back to Daniel. I've spent 30 years protecting this country, and I've done things I'm not proud of. Things that had to be done. You were part of some of those things, and you handled yourself with honor. That's why I'm here, Daniel, because I respect you. And because I want to give you a chance to control this situation before it controls you. How? Morrison turned to face him. The media wants a hero. Give them one. Do interviews. Accept the praise. Let them turn you into a symbol. The more they focus on the man who saved the girl, the less they'll dig into the man you were before. You want me to become a public figure? I want you to become a carefully managed public figure, one whose story we can shape and control, one who inspires people without raising questions. Morrison's expression softened slightly. You have a daughter, Daniel, a beautiful little girl who deserves a father who isn't looking over his shoulder for the rest of his life. If you play this right, you can give her that. A fresh start, a clean slate, a future without shadows. Daniel was silent for a long moment. He thought about Mia, about the life he had built for her, about the sacrifices he had made to keep her safe from the world he'd left behind. He thought about Evelyn Carter and her daughter, about the debt he now owed and the opportunities that had suddenly appeared before him. And he thought about the secrets buried in his past, the things he had done in service to his country that still haunted his dreams, the weight of classified operations and moral compromises that he had carried alone for so many years. What happens if I say no? Morrison's expression didn't change. Then we have a problem, and problems have a way of resolving themselves one way or another. That sounds like a threat. It's not a threat, Daniel. It's reality. Morrison moved toward the door. You have 3 days to think about it. After that, I'll need an answer. And I sincerely hope, for your sake and your daughter's, that it's the right one. He left without another word, and Daniel was alone with the weight of everything that had just been said. 3 days. 3 days to decide whether to become a puppet or a target. Neither option felt like a choice. The door opened again, and this time it was Evelyn who entered. She took one look at his face and stopped in her tracks. What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. Something like that. Evelyn closed the door and crossed to the bedside. Who was that man? Jessica said he showed up without an appointment and insisted on seeing you alone. An old acquaintance. From your military days? Daniel looked at her sharply. How do you know about that? I did some research. After everything that happened, I wanted to know who you really are. Evelyn's voice was careful, measured. Your service record is sealed, which means you were involved in something significant, something the government doesn't want people to know about. It's not what you think. I don't think anything. I'm just observing. She sat down in the chair Morrison had vacated. Daniel, I'm not trying to pry into your past. Whatever you did, whoever you were, it doesn't change what happened 3 nights ago. You saved my daughter. That's what matters to me. It should matter what kind of man I am, what I've done. Then tell me. Evelyn's eyes met his, and there was no judgment in them, only curiosity, only the desire to understand. Tell me who you really are. Daniel was quiet for a long time. He stared at the ceiling, at the patterns of light and shadow that shifted across the tiles, and he felt the weight of years pressing down on him. I was a Marine, he said finally. Force Recon. We did the jobs that nobody else could do. Hostage rescue, high-value target extraction, things that never made the news and never would. That sounds heroic. Some of it was. Some of it... He trailed off, searching for words that didn't exist. War is complicated. The line between hero and monster gets blurry when you're in the middle of it. You do things because you're ordered to, because you believe they're necessary, because the alternative is watching your friends die. And then you come home and you realize that the person you've become isn't the person you thought you were. Evelyn was silent, letting him speak at his own pace. There was a mission in Kandahar. We were sent to extract a high-value target, a man who had information about an imminent attack on American soil. The intelligence was solid. The mission was approved at the highest levels. But when we got there, Daniel's voice grew distant. It wasn't what we expected. There were civilians, women, children, and our target was using them as shields. What did you do? What I was trained to do, what I had to do. The words came out flat, empty. We completed the mission. The target was neutralized. The intelligence was recovered. And because of what we learned that night, an attack on American soil was prevented. Thousands of lives were saved. Then why do you sound like you're confessing to a crime? Daniel turned his head to look at her. Because 8 people died that night who didn't have to die. Because I made choices in the heat of the moment that I've questioned every day since. Because being a hero and being a good man aren't always the same thing. Evelyn absorbed this in silence. When she spoke again, her voice was soft but steady. I run a company that employs 20,000 people. Every decision I make affects their lives, their families, their futures. I've laid off workers to keep the company profitable. I've closed plants in small towns that had no other major employers. I've made choices that benefited shareholders while devastating communities. She paused. I tell myself it's necessary, that the alternative would be worse, that I'm serving the greater good. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wonder if I'm just making excuses for the harm I've caused. That's not the same thing, isn't it? Evelyn leaned forward. We all carry guilt, Daniel. We all have moments we wish we could take back, decisions that haunt us. The question isn't whether we've made mistakes. The question is what we do with them, how we move forward, who we choose to become. Daniel studied her face, looking for signs of judgment or condemnation. He found neither. Only understanding, only the recognition of shared humanity, shared imperfection, shared struggle. The man who was here, he said slowly, Colonel Morrison. He wants me to go public, to become the face of something. He says if I cooperate, they'll leave me alone. If I don't... He didn't finish the sentence. Evelyn's expression hardened. He threatened you? He called it a warning. Same thing. She stood and paced to the window, her movements sharp with anger. I won't let them intimidate you, not after what you did for my family. Evelyn, these aren't people you can fight with lawsuits and press releases. They operate in a different world. Then we'll find people who operate in that world too. She turned to face him. I have resources, Daniel, connections, influence. If someone is threatening you, I want to help. Why? The question seemed to catch her off guard. What do you mean, why? I saved your daughter's life. Your gratitude is understandable. But this is more than gratitude. This is... He searched for the right word. Investment. Commitment. Why do you care what happens to me beyond the hospital bills and the recovery time? Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, more vulnerable. Because I saw something in you that I haven't seen in a long time. Not just courage. Something else. Something I've been missing. What? Integrity. She sat down on the edge of his bed, closer than she had been before. I spend my days surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, power, access. influence. Everyone has an agenda. Everyone is playing an angle. But you, she shook her head, you threw yourself in front of a bullet for a child you'd never met. You didn't think about what you'd gain or what it would cost you. You just acted because it was right. That doesn't make me special. Anyone would have. No. Her voice was firm. They wouldn't have. I was in that room, Daniel. I saw 700 people freeze while a gun was pointed at my daughter. I saw security guards hesitate. I saw powerful men and women trample each other trying to escape. And I saw you run toward the danger while everyone else ran away. Her eyes glistened. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How precious? Daniel didn't know what to say. He had never thought of himself as special, had never wanted to be special. He had wanted only to be a good father, a decent man, someone who made the world slightly better instead of worse. But maybe Evelyn was right. Maybe there was something in him worth protecting, something worth fighting for. What do you propose? He asked. Let me help you. Not just with the medical bills, but with everything. The media attention, the government pressure. Whatever comes next. Evelyn's voice was steady now, the vulnerability replaced by determination. I have lawyers who specialize in situations like this. I have publicists who can manage your image. I have connections in Washington who might be able to counterbalance whatever pressure Morrison is bringing. And in return? Nothing. She held his gaze. I don't want anything from you, Daniel. I'm not asking you to work for me or be indebted to me or become part of my corporate machine. I'm asking you to let me repay a debt that can never truly be repaid, because my daughter is alive because of you. And that means something. That means everything. Daniel thought about Mia, about the drawings she'd made of their family, about the way she looked at him like he was the center of her universe. He thought about the life he had built, fragile and imperfect but real, and he thought about what it would mean to let someone else into that life, to accept help, to trust. Trust didn't come easily to him. Not anymore. Not after everything he had seen and done. But Evelyn was offering something he hadn't felt in a long time. Partnership. Understanding. The possibility of not being alone. Okay, he said finally, but I have conditions. Name them. Mia comes first. Always. Whatever happens, whatever decisions we make, her safety and happiness are the priority. If anything threatens that, I walk away. No questions, no arguments. Agreed. And I want to know what's happening. No secrets, no manipulation. If you're pulling strings on my behalf, I want to know which strings and why. Also agreed. And I need you to understand something. Daniel's voice grew quiet, serious. I'm not the man you saw in that video. I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who made a decision in a moment of crisis. I have flaws. I have darkness. I've done things that would make you look at me differently. If you're going to help me, you need to accept that the real Daniel Brooks is more complicated than the one the media is celebrating. Evelyn reached out and took his hand. Her touch was warm, grounding, unexpected. I'm not looking for a symbol, Daniel. I'm looking for a person, a real person, with all the complications that implies. She squeezed his hand gently. Whatever darkness you're carrying, you don't have to carry it alone anymore. The words hit him somewhere deep, in a place he had thought was closed off forever. He felt tears prick at his eyes and blinked them back, unwilling to show that much vulnerability even now. Thank you, he managed. Don't thank me yet. We have a lot of work to do. Evelyn released his hand and stood. I'm going to make some calls. In the meantime, try to rest. You're being discharged tomorrow, and then things are going to get complicated. She was almost at the door when Daniel called out to her. Evelyn? She turned. That man, Morrison, he said I have 3 days to give him an answer. What do you think I should do? Evelyn considered the question carefully. I think you should do what you've always done. What you did in that ballroom. Trust your instincts. Act with integrity. And don't let anyone, no matter how powerful, force you into being something you're not. She left, and Daniel was alone again with his thoughts. Trust your instincts. Act with integrity. The words echoed in his mind as he stared at the ceiling. He thought about all the times his instincts had served him, all the moments when his training and his gut had guided him through impossible situations. He thought about the night of the gala, when his body had moved before his mind could catch up, when 30 years of experience had compressed into a single, decisive action. And he thought about Kandahar, about the mission that had changed everything, about the choices he had made and the lives they had cost. His instincts had guided him then too. But were they the right instincts? Were they the instincts of a hero or a killer? The door opened and Mia came bouncing back into the room, her earlier concern forgotten in the excitement of whatever adventure she'd had in the waiting room. "Daddy, Jessica let me have hot chocolate from the fancy machine, and Lily's here. Can she come in? Please, please, please?" Before Daniel could answer, Lily appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, her blue eyes bright with the same excitement that animated Mia. "Hi, Mr. Brooks. Mommy said I could visit if it's okay with you." Daniel looked at the two girls, one dark-haired and one blonde, one his whole world and one whose life he had saved, and he felt something shift inside him, something loosen, something that had been clenched tight for years. "Of course it's okay. Come on in." Lily crossed to the bed and climbed up on the end, sitting cross-legged next to where Mia had perched herself. The two girls exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them, and then they both burst into giggles. "What's so funny?" Daniel asked. "Nothing," Mia said, still giggling. "Girl stuff." "Yeah," Lily added, "you wouldn't understand." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Try me." The girls exchanged another look, and then Mia leaned forward conspiratorially. "We decided we're going to be best friends forever, and we made a secret handshake. Want to see?" "I would love to see." What followed was an elaborate series of hand movements, fist bumps, finger wiggles, and what appeared to be a dance move thrown in for good measure. The whole thing took about 30 seconds and ended with both girls collapsing into giggles again. "Very impressive," Daniel said solemnly. "I don't think I could replicate that if I tried." "You're not supposed to replicate it," Lily said seriously. "It's secret. Only best friends know it." "I see. My apologies." The afternoon passed in a blur of laughter and conversation. The girls played games on the tablet, made up stories about imaginary kingdoms, and argued passionately about which Disney princess was the best. Daniel watched them, marveling at the resilience of children, at their ability to find joy and connection even in the shadow of trauma. At some point, Jessica appeared with food from a nearby restaurant, real food instead of hospital fare, and the four of them ate together like a strange, improvised family. The conversation flowed easily, with Mia and Lily dominating the discussion while Daniel and Jessica contributed occasional comments and observations. For a few hours, Daniel forgot about Colonel Morrison and the 3-day deadline. He forgot about the video and the 47 million views and the weight of his past pressing down on him. He was just a dad, sitting in a hospital room, watching his daughter make a friend. It was almost enough to make him believe that everything would be okay. Almost. The evening brought a change in atmosphere. Evelyn returned with news, her expression a mixture of triumph and concern. "I spoke with my lawyers. They're looking into Morrison and his claims. Apparently, there's some precedent for what he's doing, a kind of soft pressure that the military uses to manage former operatives who have knowledge of sensitive operations." She sat down in the chair beside Daniel's bed, her voice low so the girls, playing in the corner, wouldn't hear. "But there are also protections. Whistleblower laws, civil liberties considerations, things that even the government has to respect. Morrison doesn't strike me as someone who respects boundaries." "No, but he's also not omnipotent. He's a retired colonel working with a limited network of old connections. If we can get the right people involved, people who have more current authority, we might be able to neutralize his influence. And if we can't?" Evelyn met his eyes. "Then we go public. Tell your story before anyone else can twist it. Control the narrative." "My story includes things the government doesn't want public." "Then we tell the parts they can't object to, the parts that make you human. A father who walked away from a prestigious career to raise his daughter. A man who spent years in anonymous service before one moment of heroism thrust him into the spotlight." She leaned forward. "We don't have to reveal anything classified. We just have to make you sympathetic enough that going after you becomes politically costly." Daniel considered this. It was a gamble, a big one, but it might be the only play he had. "There's something else," Evelyn said. "Something I learned today that you need to know." "What?" "Gregory Walsh, The VP who confronted you at the gala, the one who told you to stay out of sight. Her jaw tightened. He's been talking to reporters, trying to get ahead of the story. He's claiming that you were acting erratically before the shooting, that security had flagged you as a potential concern. Daniel felt his blood pressure spike. That's a lie. I know. But lies have a way of spreading if they're not countered quickly. Evelyn's eyes flashed with anger. I'm firing him tomorrow, and I'm issuing a statement that makes it clear his claims are baseless and self-serving. You don't have to do that for me. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because it's right. She stood, pacing the small room. Gregory Walsh watched my daughter almost die while he was too busy worrying about optics to help. He insulted the man who saved her, and now he's trying to cover his own incompetence by tearing you down. Her voice hardened. He doesn't get to do that, not while I'm still the CEO. Daniel watched her, seeing a side of Evelyn Carter that he hadn't seen before. Not the composed executive or the grateful mother, but the warrior beneath. The woman who had built an empire in a world that didn't want to let her succeed. You're something else, he said quietly. She stopped pacing and looked at him. What do you mean? I mean you're fierce, protective. You see an injustice and you want to fix it. He smiled slightly. That's a good quality. Rare, in my experience. Evelyn's expression softened. I learned early that if you don't fight for what's right, no one else will. The world isn't set up to reward kindness or fairness. You have to carve out space for those things yourself. That sounds exhausting. It is, but the alternative is worse. She moved back to the chair and sat down. The alternative is becoming someone you don't recognize. Someone who looks the other way because it's easier. Someone who lets injustice slide because fighting it is too hard. She met his eyes. I refuse to be that person. Daniel nodded slowly. I understand that. More than you know. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the sounds of the girls playing filling the space between them. Then Evelyn spoke again, her voice thoughtful. Can I ask you something personal? Depends on how personal. Your wife, Mia's mother. What happened to her? The question hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. He closed his eyes for a moment, collecting himself before answering. Cancer, 4 years ago. She fought for 2 years, but in the end, he trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked. No, it's okay. He opened his eyes. She was the best person I ever knew. Kind, patient. She had this way of seeing the good in everyone, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. A sad smile crossed his face. She's the one who convinced me to leave the military. She said I had given enough, that it was time to build something instead of destroy things. She sounds wonderful. She was. And when she died, I thought about going back. To the work I'd done before, to the person I used to be. Daniel's voice grew quiet. But then I looked at Mia, and I knew I couldn't. Sarah had given me something precious, something worth protecting. I couldn't honor her memory by abandoning that. So you became a maintenance worker. I became a father who happened to fix things for a living. There's a difference. He looked at her. What about you? Lily mentioned something about her father being gone. Evelyn's expression flickered. James died 6 years ago. Heart attack. Very sudden. One day he was there, the next. She shrugged, but the gesture was anything but casual. We weren't perfect, James and I. We fought about work, about priorities, about how to raise Lily, but we loved each other. And when he was gone, I threw myself into the company because I didn't know what else to do. Lily said you work all the time. The words landed like a blow. Evelyn flinched, and for a moment her composure cracked. She said that? She told Mia that she's usually with nannies and tutors, that you're always busy. Evelyn was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I tell myself it's for her, that I'm building something that will give her security, opportunity, a future. But the truth is, she paused, struggling with the words. The truth is, I don't know how to be present. I don't know how to just be a mother without an agenda or a schedule or 1,000 other things demanding my attention. It's like I've forgotten how to be still. It's not too late to learn. She looked at him, and there were tears in her eyes. How do you do it? How do you balance being there for Mia while dealing with everything else in your life? Daniel considered the question carefully. I don't always get it right. There are days when I'm exhausted, when I come home and I just want to collapse. Days when I'm short-tempered or distracted or not the father she deserves. He paused. But I try to remember that she won't be 7 forever, that every moment I miss is a moment I can't get back, that the work will always be there, but childhood is finite. That's easier when you're fixing lights than running a Fortune 500 company. Maybe, but the principle is the same. He met her eyes. Lily needs you, Evelyn, not your money or your success or your legacy. She needs you. Your presence, your attention, your love. And right now, after what she's been through, she needs it more than ever. The tears spilled over, running down Evelyn's cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed by the display of emotion. I'm sorry, I don't usually... She took a breath, steadying herself. You're right. I know you're right. I've known it for years. I just didn't have anyone brave enough to say it to my face. Brave isn't the word I'd use. Stupid, maybe. Reckless. A laugh escaped her, watery but genuine. Honest. That's the word. You're honest. Another rare quality. Comes from having nothing to lose. Daniel smiled slightly. When you don't have money or power or reputation, all you have left is the truth. Evelyn reached out and took his hand again. Thank you, Daniel, not just for saving Lily, for this, for being real with me. Thank you for listening. They sat like that for a moment, connected by something neither of them could quite name. Then the spell was broken by Mia's voice. Daddy, Lily wants to show you something. Daniel released Evelyn's hand and turned toward the girls. What is it, sweetheart? Lily approached the bed, holding a piece of paper she'd been working on. It was another drawing, more elaborate than the first one. This one showed 4 figures standing together in front of a house, 2 adults and 2 children, all holding hands. Above them, Lily had written, Our New Family. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He looked at the drawing, at the hope and longing it represented, and he felt something crack open inside him. It's beautiful, Lily. I know we're not really a family, she said quickly, her cheeks flushing. But we could be. Like, maybe we could all hang out sometimes, have dinners together, go to the park. She looked at Mia. Mia said she doesn't have a mom anymore, and I don't have a dad, so maybe... She trailed off, embarrassed by her own boldness. Daniel looked at Evelyn, who was staring at the drawing with an expression of stunned wonder. I think, he said carefully, that sounds like something worth exploring. What do you think, Ms. Carter? Evelyn's eyes met his, and in them he saw the same mix of hope and fear that he felt in his own chest. I think, she said slowly, that Lily has the right idea. Maybe it's time we all stopped being alone. The 4 of them stood there in the fading light of the hospital room, 2 broken families considering the possibility of becoming something new, something different, something whole. Outside, the sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. And somewhere in that vast, complicated city, the pieces of their lives were beginning to rearrange themselves into a pattern none of them had expected. The discharge papers were signed at 9 in the morning, and by 10, Daniel was sitting in the back of a sleek black SUV that Evelyn had sent, watching Los Angeles blur past the tinted windows. Mia sat beside him, her small hand clasped in his, her eyes wide as she took in the unfamiliar luxury of the vehicle. This car is fancy, she whispered, running her free hand along the leather seat. Are we rich now? Daniel smiled despite the tension coiling in his chest. No, sweetheart. We're just borrowing. Can we borrow it forever? I don't think that's how borrowing works. The SUV didn't take them home. Daniel had expected to return to their small apartment in Koreatown, to the familiar walls and worn furniture, and the life they had built together over the past 3 years. Instead, the driver took them to a high-rise building in Century City, all glass and steel, and the kind of architectural confidence that came with unlimited budgets. Where are we? Mia asked as they pulled into an underground parking garage. I'm not sure. Daniel looked at the driver. This isn't my address. Ms. Carter's instructions, the driver said simply. She'll explain when you arrive. They took an elevator to the 15th floor, where the doors opened directly into an apartment that took Daniel's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, flooding the space with natural light. The furniture was modern and tasteful, the kind of design that looked simple but probably cost more than Daniel earned in a year. A fully stocked kitchen gleamed to one side, and through an open doorway he could see bedrooms, plural, each larger than his entire apartment. "Daddy," Mia's voice was hushed with awe. "Is this a palace?" "It's certainly something." Evelyn emerged from one of the back rooms, dressed casually in jeans and a silk blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked different than she had in the hospital, softer somehow, more approachable. "Welcome," she said, spreading her arms to encompass the space. "What do you think?" "I think there's been a mistake. We can't stay here. It's a corporate apartment. Nexus owns the building, and this unit has been sitting empty for months. You'll be doing me a favor by using it." She moved toward them, her expression earnest. "Daniel, your apartment isn't safe right now. The press knows your address. There were reporters camped outside your building this morning." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "Reporters?" "They want interviews, comments, sound bites." Evelyn's voice was gentle but firm. "If you go home, you'll be mobbed, and Mia will be caught in the middle of it." He looked at his daughter, at her innocent face and trusting eyes, and he knew Evelyn was right. He couldn't subject Mia to a media circus, couldn't let her become a prop in someone else's story. "How long?" he asked. "As long as you need, until the attention dies down, or until we find a more permanent solution." Evelyn crouched down to Mia's level. "There's a room for you, Mia, with a big window and a view of the whole city. Would you like to see it?" Mia looked at Daniel, seeking permission. He nodded, and she followed Evelyn through the apartment with the cautious excitement of a child who had learned not to get her hopes up too quickly. Daniel stood alone in the living room, surrounded by luxury he had never asked for and wasn't sure he deserved. He moved to the window and looked out at the city, at the millions of lives unfolding below him, and he tried to make sense of everything that had happened. 1 week ago, he had been nobody. A maintenance worker, a single father, a man who fixed lights and unclogged drains and lived paycheck to paycheck in a cramped apartment with his daughter. Now he was Shield Man, a national hero, a symbol of courage and sacrifice that he barely recognized. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had spent 7 years cultivating invisibility, and in 30 seconds, he had become one of the most visible people in America. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number. 2 days remaining. "I hope you're using them wisely. Colonel Morrison." Daniel deleted the message without responding, but the weight of it settled over him like a shroud. 2 days to decide his future. 2 days to choose between cooperation and conflict, between becoming a managed symbol or a targeted threat. 2 days to figure out how to protect his daughter from a world that was suddenly paying attention. "Daddy!" Mia's voice rang out from somewhere deeper in the apartment. "Come see my room. There's a bed that's like huge." Daniel pushed the dark thoughts aside and followed the sound of his daughter's voice. Whatever was coming, he would face it, but right now, in this moment, he was just a father showing his daughter her new room. That had to be enough. It had to be. The first day in the apartment passed in a blur of unpacking and adjustment. Evelyn had thought of everything, from clothes that fit both Daniel and Mia to groceries that filled the refrigerator to toys and books that had mysteriously appeared in Mia's room. Daniel wanted to feel grateful, and part of him did. But another part of him, the part that had survived on self-reliance for so many years, bristled at the dependency. He was in the kitchen making lunch when Evelyn arrived with Lily in tow. The girls immediately disappeared into Mia's room, their excited chatter echoing through the apartment, leaving the adults alone. "I have news," Evelyn said, setting her bag on the counter. "Gregory Walsh held a press conference this morning." Daniel's hands stilled on the sandwich he was making. "What did he say?" "He accused you of being mentally unstable, claimed you had a history of erratic behavior, said the security team had flagged you as a potential threat before the gala, and that they were planning to have you removed." Her jaw tightened. "He also implied that you staged the whole thing for attention." "Staged it?" Daniel's voice came out strangled. "I took a bullet. There's footage of me taking a bullet." I know, it's absurd, but Walsh is fighting for his career, and desperate people do desperate things. Evelyn pulled out her phone and showed him a news article. The good news is most people aren't buying it. The comments are overwhelmingly on your side, but the story is out there now, and it's going to spread. Daniel read the article, feeling sick. The headline screamed, Nexus VP raises questions about hero's mental state. The accompanying photo showed Walsh at a podium, looking concerned and authoritative. The perfect image of a responsible executive protecting his company. What do? We fight back. Evelyn took the phone back and put it away. I've scheduled a press conference for tomorrow afternoon. I'm going to fire Walsh publicly and make it clear that his accusations are baseless. But I need something more. I need you. Me? An interview, your side of the story, not the classified parts. Not anything that would put you at risk, but the human parts. Who you are, why you did what you did, what you're going through now. She met his eyes. If people hear from you directly, Walsh's narrative falls apart. But if you stay silent, there's room for doubt. Daniel thought about Colonel Morrison's warning, about the pressure from Washington, about the carefully managed public figure he was supposed to become. Maybe this was that management. Maybe Evelyn's interview was exactly what Morrison wanted. Or maybe it was the opposite. Maybe speaking on his own terms, telling his own story, was the one thing that could protect him from being controlled. I'll do it, he said, but I have conditions. Name them. No questions about my military service, no speculation about classified operations, and I want to see the questions in advance so I can prepare. Done. Evelyn's expression softened. Thank you, Daniel. I know this isn't easy. Nothing about this has been easy. He returned to making the sandwich, his hands moving mechanically. But easy isn't the same as right. And right now, the right thing is to tell my story before someone else tells it for me. The interview was scheduled for 3 o'clock the following afternoon in a studio downtown. Evelyn had arranged for a respected journalist, someone with a reputation for fairness and integrity, to conduct it. She had also arranged for Mia to spend the afternoon with Lily at the apartment, supervised by Jessica and a private security team. Daniel didn't sleep the night before. He lay in the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar room, staring at the ceiling, running through the questions he might be asked and the answers he might give. He thought about Sarah, about what she would say if she could see him now. She had always been better with words than him, better at expressing emotions and connecting with people. She would know exactly how to handle this situation. But Sarah was gone, and Daniel was alone with his thoughts and his fears and the weight of a world that was suddenly watching. At 2 o'clock, he found himself standing in front of a mirror in the apartment, adjusting a tie that Evelyn had provided. He barely recognized the man looking back at him. Clean-shaven, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit perfectly, hair trimmed and styled. He looked like someone important, someone significant. He looked like a lie. Daddy? Mia appeared in the doorway, her expression uncertain. You look different. Do I look okay? She considered the question seriously, the way she considered everything. Then she crossed the room and wrapped her arms around his waist. You look like you're pretending to be someone else. The words hit him harder than he expected. He knelt down so they were eye to eye. I feel like I'm pretending too, but sometimes grown-ups have to do things that feel strange because they're important. Like what? Like telling people the truth, even when it's scary. Like standing up for yourself, even when it would be easier to hide. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I have to go talk to some people today. They're going to ask me questions about what happened at the party, and I'm going to answer them the best I can. But I want you to know something, Mia. No matter what I say on television, no matter what anyone else says about me, I'm still your dad. I'm still the same person who reads you stories at night and makes you breakfast in the morning and loves you more than anything in the world. Mia's eyes glistened. Are you scared? A little bit, but that's okay. Being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. Sometimes being brave means doing the scary thing anyway. Like when you ran toward the gun? Exactly like that. She hugged him tighter, and he held her for a long moment, drawing strength from her small body and her enormous heart. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart. I'll be back before dinner. The studio was cold and bright, filled with lights and cameras and people who moved with the efficient purpose of professionals. Daniel sat in a chair across from the journalist, a woman named Catherine Wells who had won multiple awards for her reporting and who looked at him with eyes that missed nothing. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to thank you for agreeing to this interview. I know it's not easy to speak publicly about something so personal. Thank you for having me. The questions we discussed are the questions I'll ask. Nothing off script. And if at any point you need to stop, just say the word." Daniel nodded, grateful for her professionalism. The cameras began rolling. "Daniel Brooks," Catherine began, "1 week ago, you were unknown. Today, your name is being spoken in households across America. How does that feel?" Daniel considered the question. "Strange. Disorienting. I spent a long time trying to be invisible, and now suddenly everyone can see me. It's an adjustment." "You say you tried to be invisible. Why?" "Because I wanted a quiet life. After I left the military, after my wife passed away, I just wanted to raise my daughter in peace. I didn't need recognition or fame. I just needed to be a good father." "Tell me about that night. What was going through your mind when you saw the gunman?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I saw a man with a weapon. I saw him aiming at a child. And I knew, in that instant, that I couldn't let anything happen to her. It wasn't a decision I made. It was just instinct. My body moved before my mind could catch up. Some people would say that kind of instinct comes from training, from military experience. Maybe. I served in the Marines for 12 years. You learn things in combat that stay with you forever. How to assess threats, how to react under pressure, how to keep moving even when everything inside you is screaming to run. And yet you walked away from that life." "I did. When my daughter was born, I realized that I wanted to be there for her, every day, every moment. I didn't want to be deployed to the other side of the world, missing her first steps, her first words. I wanted to be her father, not just a photograph on the wall." Catherine nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Gregory Walsh, the VP of Nexus Technologies, has made some claims about you, that you were mentally unstable, that security had flagged you as a threat. How do you respond to those accusations?" Daniel felt the anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "Mr. Walsh is lying. He confronted me before the gala because he didn't like the way I looked. He told me to stay out of sight because he thought I would embarrass the company. That's not the behavior of someone who thought I was a threat. That's the behavior of someone who thought I was beneath him. That's a strong accusation. It's the truth, and there are witnesses. Multiple people saw our interaction. Multiple people heard what he said to me." Daniel leaned forward. "I'm not a perfect person. I've made mistakes in my life. But I'm not mentally unstable, and I did not stage anything. I saw a child in danger, and I acted. That's all." "There's been a lot of speculation about your military record. Some people are calling for more transparency about what you did during your service." "My service record is sealed for reasons I can't discuss. What I can tell you is that I served my country with honor. I did things I'm proud of, and things that haunt me. That's the reality of war. It's not clean or simple. It's messy and complicated, and it stays with you forever." "Do you consider yourself a hero?" The question hung in the air. Daniel thought about all the times that word had been applied to him over the past week. All the headlines and hashtags and social media posts calling him a hero. "I don't know what a hero is," he said finally. "I know that I made a choice in a moment of crisis. I chose to protect someone who couldn't protect herself. If that makes me a hero, then I guess I am. But I don't feel heroic. I feel like a father who did what any father would do." "But not every father would run toward a gun." "Maybe not, but every father would want to. Every parent who has ever looked at their child and felt that overwhelming need to keep them safe. They would understand why I did what I did. I wasn't thinking about being brave or heroic. I was thinking about that little girl's mother, about how she would feel if something happened to her daughter, about how I would feel if it was my daughter on that stage." Catherine was quiet for a moment, letting his words settle. Then she asked her final question. "What happens now, Daniel? What does the future look like for you?" Daniel thought about Mia, about Evelyn and Lily, about the apartment he was staying in and the life that was slowly taking shape around him. He thought about Colonel Morrison and the deadline that was looming, about the choices he still had to make and the consequences that would follow. "I don't know," he said honestly. "A week ago, I knew exactly what my life looked like. I knew where I was going and who I was. Now everything is different. Everything is uncertain." He paused, searching for the right words. "But I know one thing for sure. Whatever happens, I'm going to keep being a father. I'm going to keep showing up for my daughter. I'm going to keep trying to be the kind of man she can be proud of. That's all I can do. That's all any of us can do." The cameras stopped rolling. Catherine reached across and shook his hand. "That was powerful, Daniel. Thank you. Thank you for being fair." "It's my job." She smiled slightly. "For what it's worth, I believe you, and I think most people will too." Daniel hoped she was right. The interview aired that evening, and by the next morning, the narrative had shifted. Gregory Walsh's accusations were being dissected and dismissed. Witnesses had come forward confirming Daniel's version of events. Security footage from before the gala showed Walsh berating Daniel, just as Daniel had described. Social media was flooded with support, with people sharing their own stories of being underestimated, dismissed, made to feel invisible. At noon, Evelyn held her press conference. Daniel watched from the apartment, Mia curled up beside him on the couch, as Evelyn stood before a sea of cameras and reporters. "I am here today to address the malicious and baseless accusations made by Gregory Walsh," she began, her voice steady and strong. "Mr. Walsh's claims about Daniel Brooks are not only false, they are a desperate attempt to deflect attention from his own failures." She paused, letting the words sink in. "On the night of the gala, Mr. Walsh confronted Daniel Brooks and ordered him to stay out of sight. He did this not because Mr. Brooks posed any threat, but because Mr. Walsh was embarrassed by the presence of a maintenance worker at a high-profile event. This interaction was witnessed by multiple people and is captured on security footage." The reporters murmured, cameras flashing. "Mr. Walsh has been terminated from his position at Nexus Technologies, effective immediately. His behavior on the night of the gala and his subsequent attempts to discredit the man who saved my daughter's life are unacceptable and do not represent the values of this company." Evelyn's eyes found the camera, and for a moment it felt like she was looking directly at Daniel. Daniel Brooks is a hero. He is a father, a veteran, and a man of extraordinary courage. When everyone else ran, he ran toward the danger. He put his body between a bullet and my child. And he did so without hesitation, without expectation of reward, without any thought for himself. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. "Nexus Technologies will be establishing a foundation in his honor. The Brooks Foundation will support veterans transitioning to civilian life and single parents struggling to provide for their families. Because Daniel Brooks represents something this world desperately needs, the reminder that ordinary people can do extraordinary things." Daniel felt tears streaming down his face. He didn't try to wipe them away. Beside him, Mia looked up with worried eyes. "Daddy, are you sad?" "No, sweetheart. I'm not sad." He pulled her close. "I'm just overwhelmed." "What does overwhelmed mean?" "It means feeling too many things at once, good things and scary things and everything in between." Mia considered this. "I feel overwhelmed sometimes too, like when I'm really happy but also a little scared that the happiness will go away." Daniel's heart clenched. That's exactly what it feels like. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You've made your choice. I hope you're prepared for the consequences. Colonel Morrison." Daniel stared at the message, feeling the weight of it settle into his bones. But then another text arrived. This one from Evelyn. "Turn on Channel 7. He switched channels and found himself looking at a different press conference. This one was being held in Washington, D.C., in front of a building he recognized as the Pentagon. A woman in a military uniform stood at the podium, her posture rigid, her expression grave. "I am General Patricia Hawkins, Joint Chiefs of Staff. I am here to address the recent attempts to pressure and intimidate Daniel Brooks, a decorated Marine veteran who served this country with distinction." Daniel's breath caught. "It has come to my attention that certain individuals have been using classified information as leverage against Mr. Brooks, threatening him with exposure if he does not cooperate with their agenda. This is unacceptable. This is a violation of everything we stand for as a military and as a nation. The general's eyes blazed with controlled fury. Daniel Brooks served in some of the most dangerous operations of the last 2 decades. He saved lives. He protected his fellow soldiers. And when he left the service to raise his daughter, he did so with honor and integrity. He has earned the right to live in peace, and I will not stand by while that peace is threatened. She paused, letting the silence build. I am announcing a full investigation into the individuals responsible for these intimidation tactics. And I am publicly stating, on behalf of the United States military, that Daniel Brooks is not a target. He is not a threat. He is a hero, and he deserves to be treated as such. The press conference ended. Daniel sat in stunned silence, trying to process what he had just witnessed. His phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number, different from Morrison's. You're safe now. The general is a friend. She remembered Kandahar, and she remembered what you did for her son. Consider this debt repaid. Daniel didn't recognize the number, but he understood the message. Someone in Washington had intervened. Someone who knew his past, who knew what he had done, who had the power to protect him. He wasn't alone after all. The door to the apartment opened, and Evelyn burst in, her face flushed with triumph. Did you see? Did you watch? I saw. They backed down, Daniel. Morrison, whoever was behind him, they backed down. You're free. She crossed the room and took his hands in hers. You're free. Daniel looked at her, at the joy in her eyes, at the hope that radiated from her entire being, and he felt something break loose inside him, something that had been clenched tight for years. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. She squeezed his hands. You just have to breathe, to let yourself believe that this is real. Mia tugged at his sleeve. Daddy, does this mean we don't have to be scared anymore? Daniel looked at his daughter, at her innocent face and her hopeful eyes. He thought about everything they had been through together, everything they had survived. He thought about the future that was suddenly opening up before them, uncertain but no longer threatening. Yeah, sweetheart, he said softly. I think the scary part is over. Mia grinned and threw her arms around him. Good, because I was getting tired of being scared. Daniel laughed, the sound unexpected and liberating. He held his daughter close, feeling Evelyn's hand on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of connection after so many years of isolation. Outside, the sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The city sprawled below them, millions of lives unfolding in the fading light, each one carrying its own struggles and hopes and dreams. Daniel Brooks was no longer invisible, but for the first time in years that felt like a blessing instead of a curse. 3 weeks had passed since the press conference that changed everything, and Daniel Brooks was learning how to live in the light. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the Century City apartment, casting long golden rectangles across the hardwood floor, where Mia sat cross-legged, carefully arranging a collection of drawings she had made over the past several days. Each one told a piece of their story. A man running toward danger, a little girl with blonde braids, 2 families becoming one. She had become obsessed with documenting everything, as if by putting it on paper she could make sense of the chaos that had upended their quiet life. Daniel watched her from the kitchen, his shoulders still aching beneath the bandages, but healing well according to the doctors. Physical therapy had begun the week before, a grueling process of rebuilding strength and mobility that left him exhausted but determined. The surgeon had warned him that full recovery would take months, possibly longer. Daniel didn't care. He had survived worse. Daddy, look at this one. Mia held up her latest creation, and Daniel felt his breath catch in his throat. She had drawn their old apartment in Koreatown, small and cramped and unmistakably home. But next to it, she had drawn the new apartment, tall and gleaming with its wall of windows. And between them, she had drawn a bridge made of hearts. That's beautiful, sweetheart. What does it mean? It means we can be in both places at once. In our hearts, I mean. She studied the drawing with the seriousness of an art critic evaluating a masterpiece. Because I miss our old home, but I like our new home too. And I think it's okay to feel both things. Daniel crossed the room and knelt beside her, his knee protesting the movement, but his heart too full to care. That's very wise, Mia. Very wise. Lily taught me that. She said when her daddy died, she was sad, but also sometimes happy when she remembered the good times. She said feelings can be complicated. Lily sounds like a smart girl. She is. She's my best friend. Mia looked up at him with those two old eyes. Daddy, can I ask you something? Anything. Are we going to stay here forever? In this apartment with Lily and her mom? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications Daniel wasn't sure how to address. His relationship with Evelyn had evolved over the past weeks, shifting from gratitude to friendship to something else entirely, something neither of them had named but both of them felt. They spent evenings together, the four of them, cooking dinner and watching movies and building the kind of domestic routine that Daniel had thought was forever out of reach. But forever was a big word, and Daniel had learned not to make promises he couldn't keep. I don't know, sweetheart. We're still figuring things out. But you like Evelyn, right? And she likes you? Yes, we like each other. And Lily wants us to be a family, she told me. She said she's never had a dad. Not really, because hers died when she was too little to remember. And she thinks you would be a good dad for her too. Mia's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather. I told her I would share you because that's what best friends do. Daniel's throat tightened. That's very generous of you. I know. She returned to her drawings, apparently satisfied with the conversation. I think we should stay. I like it here, and I like not being scared anymore. The doorbell rang before Daniel could respond. He crossed to the entrance and opened it to find Evelyn standing in the hallway, dressed in jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked different than she had at the gala, less polished, more real, more herself. Good morning, she said, her smile warm. I hope I'm not too early. You're never too early. Daniel stepped aside to let her in. Coffee's fresh if you want some. I would love some. She moved past him into the apartment, and Daniel caught a hint of her perfume, something subtle and floral that he had come to associate with safety, with comfort, with the possibility of a future he hadn't dared to imagine. Evelyn! Mia jumped up and ran to her, wrapping her arms around Evelyn's waist. Look at my drawings! I made one for you. You did? Evelyn crouched down to Mia's level. Which one? Mia retrieved a drawing from her pile and presented it with ceremony. This one showed two women standing side by side, one with dark hair and one with auburn, both smiling, both surrounded by hearts. That's you and my mommy, Mia explained. I know my mommy is in heaven, but I thought maybe she would want to meet you, because you're taking care of us now, and I think she would like you. Evelyn's eyes glistened. She pulled Mia into a hug, her voice thick with emotion. That's the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me. Daniel watched them, feeling something shift in his chest, something that felt like healing. I have news, Evelyn said, standing but keeping one hand on Mia's shoulder. The foundation is officially launching next week. We've already received commitments from 12 major donors, and the applications from veterans and single parents are pouring in. That's incredible. It gets better. The board wants you involved, not as a figurehead, but as an actual leader, director of operations. You'd be overseeing programs, meeting with recipients, helping to shape the organization's mission. She paused, her eyes searching his face. It's a real job, Daniel, with a real salary, and benefits, and the chance to make a real difference. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. He had spent 7 years being invisible, doing work that no one noticed or appreciated. The idea of leading something, of being seen and recognized and valued, was both exhilarating and terrifying. What about the maintenance work? You can keep doing it if you want, but you don't have to. You don't have to fix other people's lights anymore, Daniel. You can start building something of your own. He thought about his father, who had spent 40 years working in a factory, coming home every night with grease under his fingernails and exhaustion in his eyes. His father had never complained, had never asked for more, had simply done what needed to be done to provide for his family. But Daniel was not his father, and Mia deserved more than a life of quiet survival. Okay, he said. I'll do it. Evelyn's face lit up. Really? Really. But I have one condition. Name it. The foundation focuses on practical support, not just money, but actual help, job training, childcare, mental health services. The things that people really need but can't afford. He met her eyes. I've been where these people are. I know what it's like to struggle alone, to feel like the world has forgotten you. I want to make sure they know someone sees them. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Mia tugged at Daniel's sleeve. Does this mean you'll have an office, like a real office with a desk and everything? I suppose it does. Cool. Can I visit? Can I have my own chair? Daniel laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in years. We'll see. The morning passed in a blur of plans and possibilities. Evelyn showed Daniel the foundation's preliminary budget, walked him through the organizational structure, introduced him to key staff members via video call. It was overwhelming, but in a good way, like stepping into a river and feeling the current carry you towards something new. By noon, Lily had arrived with her nanny, and the two girls disappeared into Mia's room to continue some elaborate imaginary game they had been developing all week. The sounds of their laughter drifted through the apartment, a soundtrack of joy that Daniel had almost forgotten was possible. There's something else we need to discuss, Evelyn said, her voice growing serious. Something I've been putting off. Daniel set down his coffee. What is it? The trial. Marcus Chen's trial starts in 2 months. You'll be called as a witness. The name hit Daniel like a physical blow. Marcus Chen. The man who had tried to kill Lily. The man whose bullet had torn through Daniel's shoulder. The man whose face still appeared in Daniel's nightmares, twisted with rage and desperation. I figured as much. The prosecutor says your testimony will be crucial. You're the only one who saw him clearly before the shooting, the only one who can speak to those final moments. Evelyn reached across the table and took his hand. I'll be there with you, every step of the way. It's not the testimony I'm worried about. Then what? Daniel was quiet for a moment, searching for words. I've been thinking about him. Chen. About what drove him to do what he did. About the path that led from losing his job to standing in that ballroom with a gun. He made his choices, bad choices. Yes, but choices don't happen in a vacuum. Daniel's voice was thoughtful, careful. The company that destroyed his life, your company, they didn't break any laws. They were just doing what companies do, maximizing profits, cutting costs, making decisions that looked good on spreadsheets. He paused. But those spreadsheet decisions destroyed a human being, pushed him to the edge, and then over it. Evelyn's expression was unreadable. Are you saying what happened was Nexus's fault? I'm saying it's complicated. Chen is responsible for pulling the trigger. He's responsible for the choice to hurt people instead of finding another way. But the system that created him, the forces that crushed him and left him with nothing, we're all responsible for that. All of us who look the other way when companies destroy communities. All of us who treat human beings like line items to be eliminated. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Is that why you wanted the foundation to focus on practical support? Evelyn asked finally. Because you're trying to prevent more Marcus Chens? I'm trying to prevent more victims. On both sides. Daniel met her eyes. The people Chen wanted to hurt, yes. But also the people like Chen who get chewed up and spit out by a world that doesn't care what happens to them. If we can catch them before they fall, before they lose everything, maybe we can change the ending of their stories. Evelyn was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was soft, almost fragile. After James died, I threw myself into work because I didn't know how else to cope. I told myself I was building something important, something that would change the world. But the truth is, I wasn't thinking about the world. I wasn't thinking about anything except not feeling the pain. She looked down at her hands. Nexus grew because I needed it to grow, because my ambition was really just grief wearing a different mask. And I never stopped to ask what we were becoming. You're asking now. Because of you. She looked up, and there were tears in her eyes. Because you showed me what it looks like to put other people first. Because you threw yourself in front of a bullet for a child you didn't know, and in doing so you forced me to see all the ways I've been hiding from the world instead of engaging with it. Daniel reached across and took her hand again. You're not hiding anymore. No, I'm not. She squeezed his fingers. The foundation isn't just about helping people, Daniel. It's about changing who I am, who we are. It's about becoming the kind of company, the kind of people, who don't create Marcus Chens in the first place. That's a big goal. I know, but I've built one empire. I can build another. A better one. Her eyes found his. Will you help me? Daniel thought about all the paths that had led him to this moment. The military career he had walked away from, the wife he had lost, the daughter he had raised alone, the years of invisibility and struggle and quiet determination. And now, somehow, impossibly, this. A chance to matter, a chance to build something instead of just surviving something. Yes, he said. I'll help you. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Daniel was helping Mia with her reading when the doorbell rang. He opened it to find Patricia Chen, the event coordinator from the Grand Meridian, standing in the hallway with a bouquet of flowers and an expression of nervous determination. Mr. Brooks, I hope I'm not intruding. Patricia, no, please, come in. He stepped aside. I wasn't expecting to see you. I know, I should have called first, but I wanted to thank you in person for everything you did that night, and for, she hesitated, for not blaming me, for Mia being there, for any of it. Why would I blame you? Because I let her stay, because I bent the rules, because if something had happened to her, Patricia's voice broke. I've been replaying that night in my head for weeks, all the what-ifs, all the ways it could have gone wrong. Daniel guided her to a chair in the living room. Nothing happened to Mia. She was safe. You kept her safe. You kept her safe. You kept everyone safe. We did it together. He sat across from her. Patricia, I don't know what I would have done if Mia had been in that ballroom. If she had seen what happened, you protected her from that. You gave her somewhere safe to be while the world was falling apart. Tears streamed down Patricia's face. I've been so scared that I would lose my job, scared that people would find out what I did and judge me, scared that... She stopped, overwhelmed. Mia appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of crying. She looked at Patricia, then at Daniel, then back at Patricia. Are you the nice lady who gave me cookies? She asked. Patricia laughed through her tears. Yes, sweetheart, I am. Mia crossed the room and climbed onto Patricia's lap, wrapping her small arms around the woman's neck. Don't cry. Crying is okay, but it makes me sad when other people are sad. Patricia held her tight, the tears flowing faster now. You're such a sweet girl, such a brave, sweet girl. Daniel watched them, feeling something loosen in his chest. The trauma of that night had touched so many lives, had left marks that would take years to heal. But moments like this, moments of connection and compassion, were part of the healing, were perhaps the only path forward. Patricia, he said gently, I want to offer you something. She looked up, still holding Mia. What? The foundation we're starting. The Brooks Foundation. We're going to need people, good people, people who understand what it means to care about others, to bend the rules when the rules don't serve humanity. He met her eyes. Would you consider joining us? The offer clearly surprised her. Me? But I'm just an event coordinator. You're a person who saw a scared little girl and decided to protect her, regardless of the consequences. That's exactly the kind of person we need. Patricia was silent for a long moment, processing. Then a smile spread across her face, small but genuine. I would be honored. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The foundation opened its doors to applicants, and the response was overwhelming. Hundreds of veterans struggling to transition to civilian life. Hundreds more single parents barely surviving on poverty wages. Each application told a story of struggle and resilience, of dreams deferred and hopes dimmed but not extinguished. Daniel threw himself into the work with a passion that surprised even him. He met with applicants personally, listening to their stories, helping to design programs that addressed their specific needs. He advocated for comprehensive support, for wraparound